KOWS 107.3 FM in Occidental, California. On the telephone, we have Father Matthew Fox. Good morning.
Good morning.
Very, very pleased to have you on the show, and we're looking forward to a strong exposure of your work for our listeners. Let me introduce you, please. There's no adequate introduction for Matthew Fox because his influence has yet to be fully comprehended. Perhaps in 50 or more years, we will have a sense of his life and work and its influence. Suffice it to say that Father Matthew is a passionate friend to the family of life, a man of deep love, integrity, and courage. What more do we need to know? Father Matthew is a spiritual theologian of the first magnitude. When all is said and done, Father Matt will have made a true difference, much to the better. We invite and encourage our listeners to explore this man's life work and to really feel into it. To so honor the miracle and mystery of life, to be such a devotee of the real religious nature of existence, and to labor at its revelation and elaboration is his gift to us and for us. We wish for you to discover Father Matt for yourself, for he is a doorway to the further evolution and development of our humanity. Welcome, Father Matthew Fox.
Thank you, Ken. Good to be with you.
Let me do a more traditional introduction, and I want to say that it would take a long time to really run through, even half of your life work and your career. Matthew Fox was a member of the Dominican Order of the Catholic Church for some 34 years. His education included a PhD summa cum laude in the history of theology of spirituality at the Institut Catholique de Paris. He has taught at Stanford University. You'll correct me as needed. He has taught at the Vancouver School of Theology. He established the Institute in Culture and Creation Spirituality, which was his life work for quite a few years, and there's much, much more. Matthew Fox is the author of some 30 books. Most recently, a beautiful book called Christian Mystics, 365 Readings and Meditations, which is just that, 365 short pieces of religious and spiritual instruction or writing, complete with some commentary by Father Matt. And also recently a book called The Pope's War, Why Ratzinger's Secret Crusade Has Imperiled the Church and How It Can Be Saved. Would you please fill out whatever introduction you would like for the sake of our listeners, and then we'll just have a few more words, and then we'll get into the beef of our time together here.
Sure. Well, the present Pope, when he was head of the Inquisition, known as today as the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, but previously known as the Holy Inquisition, he attacked my work and eventually expelled me from the Dominican Order. And then I became an Episcopal priest in order to work with young people to reinvent forms of worship. And we've done about 90 of what we call the Cosmic Mass, which is bringing rave into worship, liturgy, where people dance their prayer and don't just sit and turn pages in a book to pray. And we've done a lot of these masses and trained others to do them all over North America. So that's another project. I've also been working recently with inner city teenagers, trying to reinvent education from the inner city out, using the pedagogy, the philosophy of education that I employed in my institute for 30 years. And I also started a university, the University of Creative Spirituality, which ran for 9 years, which also uses pedagogy with adults, but now we're boiling it down to use it with teenagers as well. So I think that's enough warm-up.
It is. That's very much your current work, which sits on a body of deep and broad. A larger body of work that speaks to our not only the Christians among us and not only the Catholics among us, but all of us, because your understanding, your embodied understanding of existence, really, of the divine revelation of existence itself, the sacred nature of our lives here, our appearance here, the mysterious nature of it. You have been an exemplary expresser of the broadest possible comprehension of our reality here in theological terms, and I think when all is said and done, this is the work that you will be most recognized for. So I think many people, I'm sure most of our listeners know you, if not quite well, at least to some degree, and what I would this is your hour, Father Matt, and you're welcome to make of it anything you might wish to. I'm leaning toward discussing with you, toward going over all of it just one more time. If you'd be willing to just begin at the beginning with me.
Sure, but whatever's on your mind, working from presuming you want to talk about my most recent books, probably. We can talk about those things. One thing I've tried to do over the years is to work with scientists, because I think that science has so much to teach us about our life and about creation and the history of the universe and how we got here, and therefore about the mystery behind the universe. So three of my books have been with scientists, and especially Rupert Sheldrake, the British biologist. So I think that's important too, that science, and as you say, we're living in a time where we're all being impacted by all the world religions, not just our own particular denomination, if we have one at all, and we're all being impacted by science, and of course by the crisis of global warming, climate change, ecological devastation. All these things we share in common today, and I think as a species we have to reinvent ourselves and reinvent the way we live on the planet, and reinvent the way we do everything from education to religion to politics to economics. Mm-hmm. They're all failing us at this time.
Yes. It's often claimed that religion and science are mutually exclusive, but you disagree with that.
I totally disagree with that. One thing in my tradition as a Dominican, St. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century was a Dominican, and he went way out of his way to bring Aristotle, who was the best scientist of that time, into discourse with Christianity, and he paid a price for it, but he insisted that the God of nature is the God of faith as well, and he said that a mistake about creation was also a mistake about God. So obviously we should know as much as we can about creation, and for that we depend on scientists. But also I think scientists awaken awe in us, especially today when Hubble telescope and all the rest of it, we're discovering so much of the beauty and the wonder of the creativity of the universe, and all this really can reawaken awe in all of us. And it's an amazing story we're being told of how our species arrived after 13.7 billion years, and how this planet arrived 4.5 billion years ago. It's all very wonderful, and it's all creation stories are sacred. The indigenous people know this, and the Bible knows it. There are many creation stories in the Bible. And so So the nuclear story for getting from science today is very useful and exciting because it's universal. It's all of our stories beyond any particular religious or ethnic or historical tribe. And so this has a potential, I think, to unite us as a species and to reawaken the sense of reverence and gratitude that is the basis of all spiritual communication.
Mm-hmm. And much of the new cosmology is very pertinent to our spiritual and religious life, as you say. About 10 years ago, Thomas Berry came to Berkeley and was celebrated, and you gave a marvelous talk in praise and recognition of Father Berry and his work.
Were you there? You were there, were you?
I was there.
Oh, okay.
I have a transcript of that talk tucked away, buried in storage somewhere, and it means an awful lot to me because Father Berry was the greatest teacher I've had in this lifetime.
Oh, you had him as a teacher. Where?
No, just through his books. But I had a real conversion experience after reading and rereading his work and Brian Swim's work over and over again.
Wonderful. Thomas Berry was very important to me too. I had the privilege of knowing him for many years, and he devoted his life to trying to find the sacred meaning of today's cosmology, and he did a heck of a job in doing so, and he's gifted all of that with us, for us, all of us.
Yeah. Father Matt, what's a mystic?
Well, mysticism is the experience of the unity of all being, and it is our experiences of awe and of wonder, take us beyond our ego and into a place of, as I say, great sense of great unity. A word that the poet Mary Oliver uses is astonishment. I think that's a good word. She says that you should be astonished and share your astonishment with others. So wonder, to me, astonishment is wonder or awe. And there's a mystic in all of us. We were all astonished when we were young, when we were constantly learning new things and filled with awe and wonder. But I think gradually the struggles in life, including education and often religion, drives that sense of wonder down and replaces it with just problem solving or worrying or anxiety. And so we have to continually refresh that sense of wonder and awe and that mysticism in us. Mm-hmm. The mystic in us is the child, the puer, the puella, that can still find wonder in things, in the universe, and in our lives. And it cherishes that and makes it a value.
Mm-hmm. And what is a prophet?
The prophet is one who, Rabbi Heschel says a prophet is one who interferes. The way I'd put it is just that the mystic in us is the yes to life, and the prophet in us is a no to injustice. And the prophet is the spiritual warrior who having experienced mysticism, is in love with life, and therefore wants to defend it, and that means doing battle with injustice. So again, there's a prophet in each one of us. Rabbi Heschel says, in the recesses of every human existence, there's a prophet. There's a no-sayer, and Jesus, for example, is both a mystic. He very much experienced the sacredness in creation, and but he was also a prophet. He overturned the money lenders in the temple because he was angry, as all prophets are, about injustice.
And what does the word faith mean?
Well, faith primarily is about trust. It's about trust in the universe, trust in the source, in God who brought us here, and ultimately even trust in ourselves that we are here to be accomplices in the work of compassion and justice that the Creator wants to happen. I think there's a detour when we identify faith as dogmas and doctrines. That's a detour. That's not the meaning of faith in the Gospels. When Jesus uses the word faith, when he says, and he's healing people and says, your faith has healed you, that word really means trust. And I think we've rationalized faith and turned it into a series of dogmatic pronouncements, and do you believe or not believe, where faith ultimately means trust.
Mm-hmm. Is most high-quality biblical scholarship trustworthy?
Well, that's a pretty general question, but I do think that there's been some progress. I mean, is anything that humans do totally trustworthy? We're a very flawed species, and we grope in the dark, right? And we learn by trial and error, and but nevertheless, I think that especially in our lifetimes, there's been some very exciting biblical scholarship, for example, around the historical Jesus, and knowing really the difference between the words that he spoke that are in the Gospels and the words that he did not speak that are accredited to him in the Gospels, but the words that came later from the community itself. And then it's not that these words are unwise, but it's just that they didn't come from the person and personality of Jesus. They were words put in his mouth by the early believers. And so that's a little different from being able to really identify what was Jesus' agenda, if you will. And the fact that Jesus, they can now demonstrate, comes from the wisdom tradition of Israel, that I think is a very important accomplishment, scholar-wise, because the wisdom tradition is the creation-based tradition of Israel. And scholars today tell us that he was considered illegitimate as a child in his village, and so he wasn't allowed to practice the Sabbath in the synagogue. While others were in the synagogue, he was out in nature, and that's where he had so many of his mystical experiences of the divine. So this is very important. Of course, the wisdom tradition also is a feminist tradition. Wisdom is feminine in the Bible, in Hebrew, and in most languages around the world.
And there's a lot of confusion after all these years that Jesus of Nazareth, his last name was not Christ.
That's right.
And that there is a difference between the historical Jesus and the Christ.
Absolutely, and what I call the cosmic Christ. And the truth is, as Meister Eckhart said in the 14th century, a great Dominican mystic, he said that we are all meant to be mothers of God, and we are all other Christs. So that's very important, I think. That's been lost again. Again, there's been a detour that too many Christian theologians over the centuries have kind of made Jesus the only Christ. But in fact, the theology is that Christ is present in every being in the universe. And this is not dissimilar from the Buddhist teaching of the Buddha nature in all things. So we have to rediscover this, to rediscover the real sense of the sacred in nature. And it also means that when we're destroying rainforests, we're crucifying the Christ all over again. When we're eliminating species like the polar bear and these other great beings that are being eliminated today, going extinct, I think you can really say this is another crucifixion. So I think this broadens the scope and the understanding of the Christ message. And it means we're all responsible, and as Eckhart said, we are all meant to give birth to the Christ in our own lives, in our own person. And we have to take that responsibility and not project it all onto one person named Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And you speak, the other pole of that, of course, would be service and service to the Christ.
Well, absolutely. That William Hocking, the American philosopher, says a prophet is a mystic in action. So the service, prophecy is one example of service, and then other forms of healing too. They're all part of service, and it takes generosity and creativity, I think, to serve appropriately. And that's the bottom line, I think, in the Jesus story and in his teaching. We're all meant to be sons and daughters of God. I met a rabbi once who said, in our tradition, which is, of course, Jesus' tradition, Jesus was a Jew, he says, in our tradition, we believe that anyone who's living a life of wisdom is a son of God. Therefore, he said, since I think Jesus lived that kind of life, I can say Jesus is a son of God. Well, we're all sons and daughters of God, and that means we're all called to that kind of service and generosity. And Jesus was a wonderful example of that, but we're all called to it.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be redeemed?
Well, this is a question I ask of conservative and fundamentalist theologians, because they're using the word so frequently. I propose that it means becoming whole again, that it means liberating our creativity. In my book on creativity, I make that point, that you can make a good argument that redemption really means that we get in touch with our powers of co-creation, and that we take responsibility to create, because that really is what distinguishes us as a species, our powers of creativity. And if we don't tap into these and steer them to good things, they will be co-opted by society or other powers for their own agendas. After all, creativity is very godlike, but it's also demonic. It's so powerful. So there's creativity in the making of gas ovens to destroy people, just as there's creativity in creating a symphony or recreating our neighborhoods, so or in creating jobs. So creativity has both a light and a shadow side to it, and we need that direction, steering that justice gives us to make creativity really happen. And I think that's what redemption is, that we participate in the divine creativity for the sake of compassion and justice, healing, and celebration.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to have a real church?
Well, I think at this time in history we're going through a process of the disintegration, the deconstruction of church as we've known it. In my recent book on the Pope, The Pope's War, which just came out in German 2 months ago, I point out that the Catholic Church, for about 40 years now, under this Pope and the previous Pope, has gone way off base from its own teaching, the teaching of the Second Vatican Council. And so what you have is a very much of an empty shell, really. And there's a tremendous conflict today inside the Catholic Church, those who see this and those who don't want to see it. And I point out in that book a lot of the stories, sad as they are, of how the last two papacies have totally turned their back on the Vatican Council. For example, issues like national synods that were supposed to have power in themselves to appoint bishops and so forth, leaders, all this power was taken away. The lay groups that were supposed to have power to do a lot of things, including design liturgies, that's been taken away. It's just one thing after another. And, of course, liberation theology, which was such an important movement, especially in Latin America, was totally emasculated by the previous pope. And then, of course, all the scandals that have risen under these papacies regarding the cover-up of sexual abuse by priests, cover-up by bishops and cardinals. And so once you face this shadow history, you realize that, hey, it's time for a reinvention of church. And that's how I end the book. The last quarter of the book is about where we go from here. And it's important to take the treasures from the burning building, such as the mystics and the prophets. And that's one reason I wrote that book, The Christian Mystics, to kind of gather some of that amazing wisdom and so forth. But the building is burning, and the building is not, what can I say? It needs to die in order that new forms of Christianity can be born, forms that are ecumenical, that look for wisdom in all the world religions, that are ecological, that know the sacredness of creation, not afraid to tell the new cosmology, the new creation story, and forms that do not belittle the conscience and the wisdom of adults and of lay people.
Amen.
But I think the Protestant Church, too, is under tremendous duress. It, too, has to die to give birth to new forms. And we need worship that is not just about reading books at each other and being preached at. Again, that's where I've committed myself the last 15 to 20 years to bringing in new forms of worship that use the new art forms of rap and of rave, of dance, of DJ, of VJ and so forth that are really wonderful ways to celebrate. And with new languages, really, to worship in. And we've had some powerful results with these masses that we've done all over North America now.
Mm-hmm. You quote Albert Schweitzer. If I may, I'd like to read the quote. Dr. Schweitzer said, what has been passing for Christianity these past 19 centuries is merely a beginning, full of weaknesses and mistakes, not a full-grown Christianity springing from the Spirit of Jesus. And this is what you address yourself to. You talk about pressing the restart button on Christianity, and you talk about preparing the field for a new Christianity.
Exactly. And I couldn't agree with Schweitzer more, and he said that 100 years ago. So we've got a ways to go. But I do think that with today's internet and so forth, and different ways to communicate swiftly around the world and so forth, that we can make changes and adaptations quite swiftly once we get off too much obedience. We got to start taking responsibility ourselves, and because there are forces that are profiting from the present versions of Christianity that do not deserve to profit from it, that have nothing in common with the teaching of Jesus. And it's time to stand up to these, and I've tried to do that. When Ratzinger was made Pope 6 years ago, I went to Wittenberg and pounded 95 Theses on the door there, and then this spring when I was in Rome, because they were translating some of my books into Italian, I went to the basilica that Cardinal Law was in charge of in Rome and pounded the 95 Theses there in Italian, because Cardinal Law was the poster boy for bishops who covered up pedophile priests. He had one priest who had abused 150 boys, and he was passing him from parish to parish and diocese to diocese. And what did Rome do? They kept him in office for 2.5 years, and then they actually promoted him to this position in Rome, running a 4th century basilica and appointing bishops around the world. So I felt it was important to blow the whistle on that, and that's what I did in Rome this spring.
You speak about the myths to be surrendered, the myths of Christianity that need to be surrendered, and you tell us about the disaster of Augustine. Would you talk a little bit about Augustine and the catastrophic path that he set us on? If that's
well, that's interesting that you use those strong words. Augustine, the 4th century A.D., he's the first one to use the term original sin. And notice how dominant that notion has become in Christianity, both Protestant and Catholic. How strange that a concept that never dropped from Jesus' mouth, because no Jew believes in original sin, that this became almost the bedrock of Christian theology for 16 centuries. Now, there were people who resisted it. That's my book, Original Blessing, gathers those thinkers over the centuries. But it's just amazing how dominant and influential Augustine has been. Or to put it another way, Christians believe in Augustine more than they believe in Jesus. And original sin, as Augustine taught it, is about the negativity of all nature, and he linked it up with sexuality also. So that burden of darkness in Christianity has wrapped sexuality and nature into that sense of darkness, and it's not a healthy way to develop a society. It's not a healthy way to develop individuals. To teach our children that they were born blotches, and the history is not appropriate teaching. You don't get good results from that. And another thing in Augustine, of course, was he was extremely dualistic about matter versus spirit. He says that spirit is the opposite of matter. It's antagonistic to matter. It's at war with matter. And that, again, is very dangerous teaching. He also taught that women are inferior to men. He says that man, but not woman, is made in the image and likeness of God. So he sets us up for sexism and for patriarchy and for running an empire, because he came along at the time that the Roman Empire was on its last legs, and Christianity kind of picked up the pieces and in the 4th century. And I think that's why the original sin ideology has been hung around so long, because it's useful for running an empire. It gets people in line and to tell them that they're original sinners instead of blessings. And that's dangerous, obviously. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot. And then Polanyi, who is a great chemist at the University of Chicago who won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, he says that Augustine killed science in the West for 1,000 years. In other words, he also set up this antagonism between science and religion, and we've paid a price for that too for a long time. So Augustine's pessimism and dualism, I think, has hung around a long time, not just in the church, but I think it's been carried over by capitalism, by consumer capitalism, the idea that you have to get salvation by buying something you don't have. That, to me, is just original sin secularized, and it feeds the same kind of energies of power and greed and disempowerment for the majority of people that Augustine's teachings carry on.
So we might do well to show Augustine the door.
Yes, I propose perhaps a ritual to bury many of his ideas. Now, I'm not saying he wasn't a man who who strove to do well, and I'm not saying he was not a good writer. He was the first, probably wrote the first autobiography that we have. He was quite a psychological genius insofar as his introspection goes. But there's danger there too. He reduced a lot of Christianity to psychology instead of social awareness.
Yeah.
And love is not just about the psychological. Love is also about justice and the social, and I think he was very weak on that.
Right. Well, the time we're living in now, every speck of human endeavor needs to be subjected to peer review.
Well, that's right. That's right. That's right, and we should not take for granted that Augustine is the last word in Christianity.
Nor is the Vatican. Jesus never visited Rome.
That's right. He never heard of the Vatican.
He never heard of the Vatican.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's really marvelous, isn't it? What we're living in now, the time we're living in now.
Well, it is. I mean, there is so much opportunity for the human race to move to another level of evolution and consciousness on the one hand. On the other hand, there are plenty of dark forces that would drag us back into sectarianism and pettiness and violence and war, often in the name of religion. This is definitely out there too. So there really is a struggle going on. And I think that in many ways our whole species is in a dark night of the soul at this time, a dark night of our species. Mm-hmm. And we should ask why we're here and what we have to learn from it. And the mystics tell us that there's a purification that goes on in the dark night, and the purification is especially around our longings. So what are we really longing for as a species? That's an important question to ask today. Mm-hmm. And I think we are longing for interconnectivity, for celebration, for community, for justice, and to share, and for wisdom. So we want to share the wisdom of our various spiritual traditions, not go to war over the differences. And we want education to be schools of wisdom, not just schools of knowledge that empower a few to control the many. I think that's unfortunately what's happening with a lot of education today.
Yeah.
I don't think it's about wisdom. I think it's about power and knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're being tested. We're being challenged.
Definitely.
And well, we should be.
And well, we should be, yeah. I mean, time is running out on our species. And,
if we're
many others.
If we're not worthy to meet this challenge, then we're not worthy to stay here.
Well, that's right. And that's right. And it's obvious that, I met a scientist, quite a renowned scientist at Stanford a few years ago. He said to me, we're the first species in 4.5 billion years of the planet that can choose not to go extinct. Mm-hmm. And then he added, but of course we haven't made that choice yet. So that shows the stakes in this time in which we live, that we have to make choices not to go extinct. And religion should be part of the solution, not the problem. But very often it's showing its shadow side as part of the problem and not the solution.
We had a guest on the show here 2 weeks ago, a great farmer, a brilliant farmer named Joel Salatin. And I had, in preparing to interview him, I had read a previous interview he did that concerned his Christianity. And it really turned me on. And I asked him about it, and he talked for a while about his Christianity. And this is the kind of Christianity that I've been waiting for, to show its face my whole life, to fulfill the message of Christ and redeem the promise of Christianity to bring love and justice to this world and to serve that
Great.
in all directions. So
I'll bet he was a mystic too. I have a friend who's a farmer, and he says every small farmer is a mystic, he says, because we're close to nature, we're close to the animals, we're close to the land and the seasons. But he said, when I grew up as a Christian and a farmer, and he's from Nebraska, he said, my family went to church every Sunday. He was evangelical. He said, all I ever heard was preaching about hellfire and damnation. I never heard one sermon about the mysticism of being a farmer, working the land, and so forth. He said it was in discovering my work and the work of Meister Eckhart and these nature mystics, creation mystics that I speak of. He said only there did he find an affirmation for his own mystical experience as a boy even, and as a young man on the farm.
Yeah. Well, I was raised in New York City. I was not raised in the Christian tradition, and a couple of blocks away was the big Catholic church, Holy Name, and this is where the bells would ring. And I got to tell you, it was a dark. It was on a hill, and it was. We were afraid of it. It just was a dark place, and I'm afraid that our poor Catholic brothers and sisters, to a large degree, have suffered under the darkness that has been institutionalized in the Roman Catholic Church, at least, for much too long. And we really do want to have our souls and spirits liberated from this oppressive message, which is not the message of Christ. At least that's my understanding.
Well, yeah, and in the 1960s, there really was a great opening and a great hope in the Catholic Church because of Pope John the 23rd and the Vatican Council that he launched. And there was all this new thinking and fresh thinking and opening of the doors and so forth. And there really was so much optimism. And yet all that was shut down then by Pope John Paul II and the present Pope. They went back to medieval ways of inquisitions, really. As I point out in my Pope book there, it ends with 92 names of theologians like myself who were silenced or banished or expelled from all over the world. You know, since that book came out 6 months ago, there are another 10 names that I'm going to add to the book when the paperback comes out in a few months, because there are 10 more people who've been silenced, banished, and told to shut up just because they're trying to get people to think about their Christianity and not just be passive to the orders coming down from the hierarchy in the Vatican.
Yeah. That was my next question, was about the silenced ones and what you call ecclesiogenesis.
Yeah, well, ecclesiogenesis is the act of birthing church and birthing new communities and small communities. The one way I put it is I don't think we need to travel in the 21st century with basilicas on our back. I think backpacks on our back will be just fine. And so we travel much lighter. We need spirituality more than we need religion. And religion, I think, is kind of gone as far as it can go as far as institutional bigness. Too big to fail. But I think the spirituality is much more what's needed. And this is about individual practice and communal practice, of course. But the communities have to start over. We have to begin from scratch. And there are a lot of small communities, base communities, that are operating and have been operating all over the world now, and it's growing because many people are being disillusioned by the larger church structures at this time. And so I think this is work that is really happening, and it is how the church began too. It began in people's homes. It began in the catacombs, in the sewers of Rome. And it was not about multi-million-dollar buildings on the corner.
Would you tell us the brief version of the story of the Pentecost?
Well, the Pentecost moment is powerful in the Christian story because this was, pardon me, this was after Jesus had died, and the disciples were, and it was many months after, and the disciples were very scared. They thought they were going to be killed by the empire too, and they were huddling in a room and kind of sharing their woe. And And then this an occurrence happened where they felt empowered. They felt the flame of the Spirit, and instead of cowering in the corner, they went out and started preaching to the people, and supposedly in many languages. This is understood and remembered as the birth of the church, that it was the Spirit. And of course, Peter quoted the prophet Joel, a beautiful prophecy about your young shall see visions and your old shall dream dreams. And and it's about the Spirit making things new. So the early Christians appropriated that language from the Jewish prophets to that occurrence of their receiving the Spirit and overcoming their fear with courage. And so that's spoken of as the birth of the church.
Father Matthew, I'm told that you have a seminar, a teleseminar, a conference coming?
That's right, yeah. In January, we're going to have 10 weeks. The first week is free, where people can get online, and then I'll be teaching about the mystics. And then for 3 weeks, I'll be teaching about Hildegard, the wonderful 12th century Benedictine abbess who was a healer and a prophet and a musician and a painter. And then for 3 weeks, I'll teach Meister Eckhart, this great 13th century Dominican. And then for 3 weeks, Thomas Aquinas, the Dominican theologian and mystic who preceded him. And he was so big on science and spirituality. So yeah, there'll be a 9-week course preceded by a 1-week free course. And it's one of these technological things that we can discuss together. Groups can discuss in small groups. It won't just be me talking, but there'll be interaction as well. So we're looking forward to that. It's a new medium for me to try to teach and teach broadly, and it will be international because given what the internet can do, we'll have students from all over the world participating, so that could be exciting.
How do we connect to this?
Well, I think you can just go to my website. Information is up or will be up very soon. That would be www.matthewfox.org, 2 T's in Matthew. That might be the simplest way to go. No, I don't know how much of the information is up now, but I know it'll be up, all the details in a week or so.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a minute or a minute and a half on the sacred masculine?
Oh, yeah. Well, I wrote this book on the sacred masculine called The Hidden Spirituality of Men, 10 Metaphors for Awakening the Sacred Masculine. I wrote this 2 years ago. And I think it's so important because the awakening of the goddess and the divine feminine has been a very important accomplishment over the last 40 years. But now we have to take a look at the masculine, too. The goddess, the divine feminine, deserves a worthy consort. And I think a lot of masculinity has been toxic and distorted in the West, especially the last few hundred years. So in this book, I take 10 archetypes, such as the green man, the father sky, the blue man, the spiritual warrior, other archetypes that give us a healthy view of the masculine. And that is so needed today. Women need it as well as men. Once I was lecturing on this, a man came up to me as Native American, and he said, I work in prisons, been working there for 12 years, and I've used your book on the sacred masculine. He said, it's the first book I've ever used that gets men to look at the nobility inside themselves. He said, in prison, most men are projecting onto others, but your book, by using those archetypes, those metaphors, it gets them to look inside and to discover their own nobility. And I thought that was a really affirming and powerful statement about the book, because I do think the issue is the nobility of men, and I think that men have pretty bad images of themselves for a lot of reasons. And part of it is that our toxic definition of masculinity leaves a lot out and does not praise men for what they are and can be. And that nobility that is there is not unlike the original blessing concept that we were talking about earlier. So Yeah, people can find that book. It's available, and it's for women as well as men. Not only because women have a lot of men in their lives, their sons and grandsons and husbands and lovers and co-workers and all, but also because there's a masculine side to the women's soul, just as there's a feminine side to the masculine soul. And if the masculine has been distorted or toxic, as I think it has, then it means women too are walking around with a partially toxic soul.
Who said, "Do not hide your light under a bushel"?
Well, Jesus said that, and Buddha said something quite similar: "Be a light unto yourself." Even, yeah.
And finally, I want to, you say that love and justice cannot be separated.
That's right, and that's the Jewish tradition. And when you separate love from justice, you get soap operas. You get an eternal drama of sentimentality. And love has a hard side to it. And love is not just about feelings and mush. It's also about justice, and you can't say you love others if you're not creating justice so that they can love themselves.
Father Matt, thanks for coming and talking to us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for this conversation, Ken. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your program that you're online asking these kind of questions and digging up crazy people like myself.
That's right. It's our privilege. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye now.
Matthew Fox, Father Matthew Fox, currently in Oakland, California. Google him. Get familiar with his work. Oh, boy, he's so great. Matthew Fox is...